Good morning, everybody. So I'm Glynn. I'm an environmental science teacher with mostly ninth graders at Furness High School in South Philadelphia. You've been a great audience so far, but we're going to do a little audience participation to get started. So thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you disagree. Don't worry, some softballs to get started. All right. Fire is alive. Thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you disagree. A lot of thumbs up in here. Fire's not alive. Get out of here. Fire's not a living thing. All right, good morning. All right, wake up. All right, we got some audience. More coffee. All right, next one. Flowers are alive. Okay, all right, I feel a lot better about that one. Thank you, everyone. All right. What about a chainsaw? Oh, get out of here. Get out of here. Got some jokers in the audience. All right, how about this one? Bacteria are alive. All right. Mixed reviews, mixed reviews. Eagles are alive, go birds. Hey, all right. And our last one, thank you, viruses are alive. Ooh, this is our tricky one. We got a sideways, I saw a sideways on this one. All right. So at the beginning of the school year in environmental science, I asked students, what's in the environment? What are some things? Are they living? Are they non-living? They never say bacteria or viruses. Those are very, very small things, like fire shows up, flowers, plants, animals, things that make visual, obvious sense. So the students are also not sure about viruses, if you had any doubt. So they know that I'm alive. They know that Instagram is not alive. Viruses, some students who get everything else right didn't know about coronavirus. Now, we're trying to kill coronavirus. We're trying to get through this. But why? Why are viruses not considered alive? So our two Pennsylvania biology standards are the keystones. Characteristics of life. What are the characteristics of life of all organisms? And what are the mechanisms of evolution? So one of the characteristics of life is that things change over time. So where's my presentation going? We have a global and local context. How do we situate these ideas? What makes something alive? Evolution as a requirement for life. Viruses, possibly also a requirement for life when used in the fight against antibiotic resistance, and what students have done and will do so far. So the local and global context. The World Health Organization has declared that antimicrobial resistance, AMR, is one of the top 10 global public health threats facing humanity. So we'll talk about what is that in a couple slides, but in 204 countries, antimicrobial resistance is the greatest cause of death, higher than HIV or malaria. The economic costs by 2050, these infections could reduce GDP in developing countries by 5 to 7%. That means less money for education, that means less money for healthcare, that means less money for growing quality of life. Within the United States, there are 3 million infections from antimicrobial resistance every year. That means missed work. That means fear of hospital costs. That means fear of your family members being sick. That means losing loved ones. That means losing providers. I've had teens who had to learn how to get a cell phone plan after their families weren't in this world anymore. 48,000 deaths in the United States alone, and we're a developing country with a healthcare system that can fight these things if you have access. And in Philadelphia, in 2008, a 17-year-old student athlete died from methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA, which was more of a crisis back in the day, but even healthy young teenagers can be impacted by these diseases. So it's also an environmental justice context. Streptococcus pneumoniae has a vaccine. You can get a pneumonia vaccine, but the serotype, the physical bacteria that was used, they did not include the variety that was most likely to infect black populations. So even if somebody got a vaccination from 2007 to 2018, if they were black, they were less protected than other white Americans. Clostridium difficile, often called C. diff, communities who are low-income, foreign-born populations who speak less English at home. That's my school. More than 60% of our students speak another language in the home, and 100% Title I low-income populations. Mycobacterium tuberculosis, called TB, more likely to infect Asian, Hispanic, and black populations. That's my school. So this is deadly important to all of my students and the whole world. So what is antimicrobial resistance? So this gray, cloudy stuff that you see on the outside, that's a bacterial colony that's growing across the petri dish. And what should happen is, when we use these drugs, it kills the bacteria. Those are antibiotics. What we're seeing is that those bacteria are growing right up to the drugs. The drugs are no longer killing these bacteria, and this is increasingly common. So what makes something alive? If we want to kill something, it needs to be alive. So what are some student ideas about this going into it? They eat, they drink, they have babies, they grow. You can tell something is biotic, that means living or once living. If it's things that grow, need something like food, water, or sunlight. So we know bacteria need certain things to grow. We also know that we need certain things to kill them. So what makes something alive? Generally accepted. Scientists love to argue, so it's generally accepted. Things that reproduce, things that make more of themselves. If it grows over time, if it changes, if it has cells, this one's like, I think that one's arbitrary. We'll talk about that. Response to stimulus, does it react to the world around it? Does it have some kind of internal chemical system that changes over time? So we need to eat food, and that becomes the bodies around us. And then evolution, does it change over time? So bacteria have all these characteristics of life, and it's necessary that something have all of them to be considered alive. If you look at this middle one there, the bacterium is the two little dots, and it looks like it's being chased by a white blood cell. So there's some kind of response to stimulus. You can see they're very active. And students knew that bacteria were alive. They had a pretty good idea about this as well. Bacteria is biotic because it's a cell, and 3 pieces of evidence that it's alive. It can move, it grows, and it reproduces. So bacteria alive, that means we can kill them. Viruses do not have all these characteristics of life. Viruses cannot reproduce on their own. If coronavirus is out in the world, it'll stay a singular virus until it gets into your body and starts to reproduce in your lung cells. Viruses do not have a cell. They're a protein shell with some kind of nucleic acid, DNA, or RNA inside. And once formed, viruses don't need additional energy. They're pretty inert. They stay that way. They don't need to eat anything. They don't need to maintain chemical processes. Viruses do have some characteristics. It's also debated whether or not they kind of seem to move. If they can't attach to one cell, they might kind of exhibit perhaps Brownian motion. They might just be moving with fluids and stuff, but they do seem to have some kind of response. And viruses do change over time. And that's what's most important to Paul Turner's fight against these bacteria. So evolution, what is evolution? Changes in populations over time. I did want to take a note, there is no conflict between religion and evolution. I grew up a young earth creationist, and I think it's a very valuable insight to the majesty of the world. I'm very happy to talk to anybody about divinity and evolutionary theory after the talk if you have any questions. So from the original origin of species in 1859, any variation, if it be in any degree profitable to an individual of any species, will tend to the preservation of that individual and will generally be inherited by its offspring. The offspring also will thus have a better chance of surviving. So in 4 slides, he's talking about natural selection. So there's variation. Everybody's different within a population. Things are different. There are dark and light versions of the peppered moth. And we know that DNA encodes these physical differences. There's something inside of these moths that make them look different. And when they have babies, the babies will inherit those traits. We call that, 2 slides ahead. Some variations are more profitable. If you're in a dark environment, the darker moth is better camouflaged. It's less likely to be seen by predators. And so if the white moth gets eaten, it can't have babies. It can't pass on that white trait into the population. And so students understand this concept. We did a candy predation lab where we took a box of candy and said, okay, pick one, you're the predator, pick one candy. And then we described what were the characteristics that made those candies desirable. Yum-malicious was one, and it also came up, one of the ones that surprised me was Starbursts, the 2-packs. You don't know which 2 colors you're gonna get, so it's not safe. They were like, oh, you don't know what you're gonna get. You might like it, you might not. And then the Snickers, I told them they couldn't eat that one. So they understand that characteristics have variation. There's variations, and some are more profitable than others. They also understood that candy does not reproduce. That was another metaphor. But in the next generation, there would be more Snickers. There would be more Starbursts and Nerds. So. Thank you. All right. So the dock moths would have more babies over time. This is natural selection. There's changes in these populations. So bacteria do have variation, and as we try to kill them, there's random mutations. The drugs would go through physical protein pores. The bacteria are developing random mutations. The drugs can't go through those pores. They've modified proteins so that they're breaking down penicillin. They'll cut this bond here. There's a protein that changes the drug itself to be ineffective. So bacteria grow really fast, they reproduce, they can also change their DNA. Like if I could give Adriana some DNA, it's not just my babies that are inheriting that DNA, it's the same generation of living organisms. So when a bacterium evolves, it's not just its next generation, it's the same bacteria that are around it already that can then inherit that. So viruses do evolve. Viruses have been fighting bacteria over time. What Paul Turner is doing in his lab, they're finding viruses that kill bacteria. So it's very specific. A virus can infect a bacterium, it inserts its nucleic acid into the cell, and then pop, the cells explode. They've done this in humans so frequently that they're having trouble writing up their medical texts because they keep successfully doing it. People who have tried for 7, 10 years to get their antibiotic-resistant bacterial infections fought with medicine are now doing it with viruses. This has an old history in Eastern Europe. And also they used it on a sea turtle. So if you love the animals, that's another way to get in with the students. So what students have done, we'll go really fast because I have 1 minute. They measured mass, they measured volume. The math teachers helped me a lot because proportional reasoning is hard. They love wearing gloves. They think our school is dirty. We grew bacteria in class. They described what the bacterial growth looked like over time. They did a wonderful job. I was very proud of them. They figured out that the cafeteria was most dirty, but my incubation system was a heat lamp in a cardboard box, so fund education. And as expected, the cafeteria has the most bacteria. It wasn't this pretty obvious though. And I expected to see lots of bacteria, but surprisingly, there weren't that many colony-forming units. I think the results don't accurately represent the data at Furness High School. They think there's more bacteria, and they're right. So what will they do next? I have to grow some E. coli on some more Petri dishes, but as you saw my heat lamp, it's not great for growing bacteria. We'll work on it. And then they'll try to find evidence of viruses. So viruses do kill bacteria. They're all around us, and the students will find evidence of that, even though they're not alive. So. We'll see once that fixed. Thank you to all of my Philadelphia fellows and our director, Edward. Thank you to Paul Turner and his lab. Grateful regards. Thank you to Tony Watlington. Pleasure to have you from Philadelphia.